Hello and welcome to the Manifestor Only podcast. Today I have the beautiful Vaness Henry, 6'2" ego manifestor or heart-led manifestor. So welcome, Vaness.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you here today. I would love it for you to introduce yourself however feels most natural to you, to anybody who's listening.
Sure. My name is Vaness Henry. I'm a 6'2" ego manifestor, and I tend to focus my studies in variable. My background is as a journalist and shamanic practitioner. So I very much, I'm a watcher and I report on what I see, and I happen to be good at tracking patterns. And I've kind of built my life around that. And I was definitely someone who was on a healing journey. I was a cancer patient as a child. I lost a parent to cancer. And so my first life phase as a sixth line was very surrounded by illness. And that shaped my second life phase, which I'm now in on the roof. And my journalism background pushed me into fields of health and wellness. Because I grew up in hospitals, I was very curious about that. And I would report on things like that. And I would report on illness. And I just tiptoed, found my way into various types of studies, especially as somebody who is in the shamanic arts. It led me into finding human design. And I definitely zeroed in on variable studies because of what I was seeing there. I didn't go in and flesh out all the other areas like in the dream rave or, there's so much that can be looked at. And I definitely went into my own little area. And it was because I was seeing different kinds of patterns. And due to my background as somebody who had cancer, I talk about that a lot in my story. It's very much a part of my story, a big part of my story. And so I started to attract people who had illness stories like that. And I started to accumulate a high volume of body graphs with people who had cancer and various illnesses and started to see some strange patterns in that. And I would sometimes cautiously talk about that online, these patterns that I would see. But I would notice that the projectors would come out of the woodwork and encourage me anytime I would be talking about that. Projectors. And I really try to listen to their guidance because they won't tell you what to do, but they will give you energy in certain places. And so I kind of use that encouragement to just build out my own philosophies. And as I was in variable studies, I went through publicly each of my little transformations in my body environment. I went through a big weight loss journey that was kind of vulnerable because people saw me go through that as soon as I shifted my environment. I went through this perspective transformation of realizing I'm non-binary, always have been, but we didn't always have that language. I had to kind of express that. And then going through this other transformation in my awareness and how I understand variable specifically. To complete that transformation, I had to find the heart to say, I use this information in a very specific way in my shamanic work, and I want to show you how. I'm no longer interested in parroting this information the way it's been classically taught. I have been watching and studying people for so long that I'd like to just report on that. And that when I started doing that, I did notice the human design community started to see me as more of a teacher. I've never really liked that. I feel like that's definitely the student, I'm the learner just reporting on it. But people around me started to call me a variable resource. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to identify that way for now so that people know what they're getting from my work. But I need to get back on my shamanic journey. I want to show how I use this information because it should be used. And depending on your background, you will use it your own way. And so there are people out there who are doing things a little bit differently that I find a lot of inspiration from, like James Alexander, I think is a really, really brilliant mind. I feel like you have a relationship there. Yeah. I love the way he will be like, I'm using source material, but I'm also a human. And so, I'm going to, put my own thing on this. And I think that is inspiring to see. I'm kind of in that camp of people now who've been in the study for a decade, and it's like, there's great resources out there, but I've got to do this my way. And it won't be for everybody. Heck, I'm in shamanic arts. Like, I know that that's not for everybody, but I can't let that stop me anymore. I need to just keep following my questioning as the journalist and see where it takes me and really get more adept at tuning out the feedback, because I'm someone who feeds on feedback. I'm a sound eater and I'm very sensitive to what people will say. But I have to tell you, since I've started tuning that out, I don't have to go do every fight. There are people now who will rise up and be like, hey, chill out for me. I do feel like I'm starting to have some community that gets me. I have found the human design space to be an incredibly healing space. These are people who come who have something to be healed. They have traumas. And so even if people are nasty to me sometimes, I know that they're on their own healing journey, and we're all here building awareness. And what is really needed from me is compassion for them and myself and their story and my story. And I'm not here to go to war. I'm here for peace. And so my journey has become about understanding what that means for me. So that's my long introduction about where I'm at and who I am. But I'm really the human design lover.
Oh, I love this so much. Thank you so much for that introduction, because this is like the topics that I want to go into, because yeah, we know Vanessa Henry as the variable resource, every time I have, and I'm not even exaggerating. I'm really good at exaggerating, but I'm not exaggerating when I say every time I have a client who wants to talk about their variable, they will say, yeah, I was on Vanessa's page and I saw this. And and I saw this and I read this, and I'm trying to figure this out. And I'm like, of course you were talking, of course you were looking at Vanessa's page to figure this out. And that
A lot of
resonates.
people too.
Mhm.
Sorry. A lot of people want to be able to understand everything from Googling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I understand that. I was that person. Um, I understand the digging, and I put a lot of content out that I try to really simplify and make fun and make beautiful. It is challenging to explain depth in a simple surface way. I like a challenge though, and I don't think that this information needs to be as deep as it is. It's kind of tucked into the human design study. And I contribute to this. It's like, this is not where you begin. You do not know your way around the body graph. This might be confusing. And also, I do wonder if it needs to be as deep as it is and so tucked away and hidden. I really am inspired by Richard Rudd's work with the gene keys, but depending on the camp you're in, he's a big villain. Like, some human design people are like, and I don't personally feel that way. I love that he showed, here's kind of like the good and the bad of each gate, you could say, and here's a secret third thing. And I really like that. I really admire the art of contemplation and letting some information sink into the marrow deep in your bones so that it affects you. I don't expect us to know everything just through intellectual study. But if you search my work, so much of my work is a fusion of my shamanic studies. I have a really big background in feng shui, and that was one of my earliest studies. And that's why I zeroed in on variable, which was because so much of the language overlaps. We hear about landscape and hardscape environments. Well, that's feng shui language. And they both are pulling from the I Ching. So they're very complementary studies. So a lot of my work, as is a lot of fellow Shores people's work, is showing the bridge and the fusions of these studies. But I'm not, if you're looking for a source material variable, just go to the source then. If you're wanting to, if you're attracted to the fusions that are coming up out there, you and I had just been talking, Teresa Brenneman just gave me a tarot reading, and she does like an HD and tarot fusion. I love that. I also just recently had a Reiki, a nine-centered Reiki fusion with Karen Scholl. I believe that's how I say her last name. Human Design Sphinx. Adore her and her work. So I'm very attracted to people who will use human design language with other modalities. And I am part of that camp. It doesn't feel good for me to be very strict in one study. I like to study the religions of the world. I like to study, you know, especially in the shamanic arts, you're studying cross-cultural patterns of how the cultures of the world are understanding their spirituality and their rituals, and you'll find a lot of common patterns. And so I come from that. Like I come from the studying of the fusions and the overlap. So if I'm ever forced to follow the rules and stay in one container, I don't last very long. I need to be able to put my feet in a bunch of different worlds. And I imagine you have a similar thing as a fellow shores person.
Yeah, one of my biggest pet peeves is that freaking meme where it's like human design and then it's like, are you guys friends? And then human design says no, and then Gene Keys says yes. And I'm like,
I just saw that.
can we please stop this fucking narrative of that we can't be friends? It's like Ra is dead. We can't hear his version of that story. Richard Rudd has told his version on the oh God, what is his name? Rick something podcast. It's a 3 hour long podcast where Richard Rudd does tell his version of the story of how he gave away his rights to doing human design and wanted to go do Gene Keys. And it's like, can we just respect the fact that people are going to really dig into this in different ways and they're going to get different things out of it? And I love Richard's work. I've never done the sequences, but I'm very drawn to understanding another level of depth of the gates through his Gene Keys work. And it's beautiful. It's romantic. It's gorgeous.
My first exposure to the Gene Keys would have been around, I think, 2019 or something. And there was this quote unquote game that came out. It was called Play Akasha, playakasha.com. It's not available anymore. And you would enter in your information. It would put you through like about a 14-week sequence or something. And each sequence, like each week, it would give you a new audio, which I didn't know at the time was one of your Gene Keys. And it would just move you through this sequence. And I was so looking each week, I would look forward to the new thing that would come. And it was at this 14-week journey. And I was living nomadically in my motorhome at that time. And I was traveling across Canada with my family. And I was so inspired by the creative approach to delivering that type of information. I'm very attracted to the gamification of things like a game or a journey or a play or a fun. And I see that now is because, in my childhood, I didn't have a lot of that. You're forced to grow up quite quick. And so when you go on the roof, you're like, fuck it, I'm playing, I'm doing whatever I want. And I found his work to be such a contrast from Ra. And at the time of ingesting Ra, I did find him to be quite severe. I did find him to say offensive things. And I've even in the past said things about him that I wish I could retract. I'm not proud of my interpretation. That was on me. And as I continued studying Ra's work, and you listen to his later work, you hear him enter into his peace frequency. You hear him, he's not talking like this, he's talking down here. Yeah. And I started to more self-inquire around how much I may have misunderstood him. He was a dad, and he talks about mothers will change the world and that this is for kids. This is for kids. So if it's so complicated, substructure and blah, blah, like, can you say that to a child? And if I can't, then I don't have it. So that's why I try to take a super, super simple approach with my work, because I need to be able to go to a kid's level and explain it to them. And my child will look at it and be like, what are my shapes again? He doesn't care about his body graph and his. And so when I was realizing the unnecessarily harsh critique I had of Ra, I had some grief, but he was always very open about this is for children. But I got caught up on needing to teach the parent how to decondition so they could even be available to their kids in the way that they needed. And so the life, like 20 years, as bulk of my work has become about teaching the parent, the adult, to decondition, when really you can hear there was an undertone and a desire that this is for kids. I'm a dad. He talks a lot about like his son, Loki, who still is affiliated with the Jovian archive and is an active person there. And I just started feeling like, can you imagine being Loki? and the polarizing things people say about your dad who's passed away. Wow, I started thinking about that character a little bit more. And so through Loki and through Ra's later teachings, I really softened on my opinion and perception of him. And I did feel a little bad about, I've been like, he was a white man saying things in the 90s, like just on my high horse. But at the time I did need to see it that way. And those were the feelings that I had. But as I continued, I see the ways I misunderstood him and see the ways I have been misunderstood or the ways I have misunderstood fellow manifestors. And I just didn't really want to stand for that anymore. And really just feel this overwhelming feeling when I think of him of like just bowing. Thank you for initiating us in this way. His work talks a lot about variable and how this will become very important. I had this, I can't remember if it's in the coloring book or whatever it's in. One of his lessons around it was saying, we need way more data collection here. This will become really important, but I haven't been able to put the same kind of energy into it because of what I realized was going on. And so I just think about him more now as, there's only so much one person can do. And I don't really think it's necessary to attack each other for differentiating and coming from your unique angle and perspective. So I really want to say I had to find a lot of courage and heart to talk about variable the way I do, because it is not the way it is classically talked about. I don't think anybody else would see it unless they had my background of cancer and seeing the high volume of illness in the body graph. Like that's where it started from. And I started experimenting with variable integration with cancer patients and had repeated stories where their chemotherapy treatment would decrease in volume. In other words, they didn't need to have as much chemo. And that's a huge fucking win to me. And that's when I felt I have to be louder about this. But I knew there would be pushback. And so it took me a long time to find the heart. And ultimately, I felt we don't know everything. Look at when we are playing with this area and you see these symptoms that these people have, and we heal and remedy those symptoms through their color palette, we can reduce their chemotherapy. You tell that to any cancer patient. Chemotherapy is one of the most violent, horrible things you can experience in your body. And you will have a lifetime of symptoms after that, of just because your body's been destroyed, and it will grow back and heal slightly different. And for me, as a taste cognition person, I've had my whole face and torso radiated along with chemotherapy. And my salivary glands operated about 10% of what the average person was. And I just thought, I'm screwed in my taste cognition. Great. Oh my God, great. I'm just basically this like self-defeating, And my husband was like, well, you love the X-Men. Your dog's name's Rogue, our son's Hawksley Storm, like that mutational story is maybe an inspiration source. And through him, he said, well, maybe this mutated you, just like Wolverine getting the adamantium in his bones that became metal, like just maybe you're not as sick as you think, because I definitely carry this inner narrative. I'm just a sick person. I've got nothing to offer. I'm useless. And I don't feel that is true, but it is an old story, And so just this entertaining the ideal, maybe you were mutated. Maybe your salivary glands do work differently, and that's fine. Like your body is still healing and is still amazing. And that's really when I started looking at symptoms differently in people and then making these targeted suggestions, like, let's experiment, let's switch this up and see how it goes. And then getting results was like, holy shit. So can you imagine being in every cancer floor on every hospital ward and be like, okay, your shores, okay, your valleys, like just even being able to understand people at that level and think about how we might adjust their treatment. So when people are fighting about the politics in human design, it's such noise to me. Like it gets me really hot, and I have to be careful because I can be like, shut the fuck up. I'm doing this over here. That has nothing to do with me. Do not distract me, or you will see that side of me that I'm trying to contain. You know what I mean? Do not distract me. And I don't ever want to be like that. That's me distracted and reacting in this way that I don't actually want to do. So I've had to be quite strict in developing boundaries around what I will tune into, who I am willing and not willing to have around me. And I have lost a lot of people along the way and also have become so much stronger.
Oh, there's a lot to unravel here. I did not know that you had had such results in working with people. I knew that you had, but I had not heard the part of results. I just have like goosebumps from the top to bottom right now, and I have tears in my eyes where it's just like, fuck. And it's like you said, it's like, well, that noise that people are like, oh, well, Ross said it differently. It's like, hello, let's look at, well, you have a logical brain. You're here to ask questions, be doubtful, figure the answers out. And that's what you're doing in your own way. Manifestor, hello. Can we just look at the differentiation, as you said? It's like we forget that biggest part of human design. And that's one of the real, hopes that I have for this podcast is that, manifestors can come to this, because I think a lot of manifestors come to human design. They're like, well, I'm a part of a minority, so there has to be a recipe, or I have to do it this way, or I have to do it that way. And it's like the science of differentiation is the whole point, and this, you going out and really data collecting the variables and actually having results with people who are physically ill and with something as devastating as cancer. It's like, how can we turn a blind eye to that and say, oh, but Ross said?
I've got to tell you this story about this 6'2" reflector that really changed my life. 6'2", I was like, oh, great. What am I going to see here? Working with this person. And they had double feeling. And I haven't really said this publicly anywhere, but I do think that the feeling cognition, or the external sense of feeling, has the potential to pick up any single ailment, a smell ailment, a taste ailment. Like there's definitely localized ailments that sense has, but due to the nature of how that works, like you plug into the other and you're basically sharing the frequency field. And so you would feel and pick up and transfer things. Like I don't think we realize just how evolved we are there. Anyway, I worked with this reflector who had been in a relationship with a really angry manifestor. And the angry manifestor was not very aware. And this reflector wanted to leave. But then all of a sudden, the manifestor had a brutal accident and needed to be cared for. And the reflector stayed for years, and maybe stayed too long. And after quite a long time together, already on the roof, they separate. And when they separate, the reflector discovers they have breast cancer, stage 4. It's terminal. You're going to have this for the rest of your life. Treatment has come a long way, but you will likely have 20 years to live. And that's about, so I just felt like, I can't imagine, like, I know we never know when we're going to die, but I can't imagine someone having this, like, I don't know, like this stamp or something. I just thought that was so devastating. And this reflector is like, well, I want love. They're 6'2". I want to be in a relationship. How the hell do I date with this like looming over me? And like, when do I reveal that? When is it safe to reveal? And I just felt like this grief. And this person was Marcus. So right away, we know there's this hypersensitivity in the environment. There's double feeling sense. And she, when I would zoom out and look at the details of her life, she had such a cool life. She was I think she called herself an atmospheric designer. And so she was in interior design. So I loved her work. I had a background with interior design and loved the feng shui going on and just hearing her story, and then experimenting with that sensitivity, experimenting with those senses, building the awareness of the senses. She told me I would get effervescent feelings sometimes, and here's how that feels for me. And I would also get these other feelings, and we would just build the awareness on what that felt like for her personally, while then at the color level, just experimenting. Okay, well, if we know we're really sensitive here, how would we want to take care of that? And through that and working together just over a season, her chemo treatment frequency lessened. And I just thought, holy shit. And her body and her doctors were saying, we don't need this much chemo, actually. We thought we did, but actually now we should make an adjustment. And it's not very common, like in the cancer world, to like reduce your treatment. You might change the cocktail of cancer treatments that you're having, but the volume, and again, like volume, the fifth tones, sensitive to amounts, sensitive to amounts. And once that happened, I was just like, if I had this space to work with people intimately, I would want to try some things. And I don't know what would happen, but there's that experimental part coming through. Like, this person's already terminal. They're already been given this finite time. So what do we have to lose other than increasing the quality of life, right? And then it would happen again. And so suddenly there was patterns in breast cancer and undefined centers in the chest. And you know what I mean? And then patterns in the tones and patterns and, the traumas people would have based on their tones. And I had to get louder about it, even though I was terrified of the people coming for me. Because, they tell us you're built for that. They are going to come for you. And I was like, well, I don't have thick skin. Like, I'm a fucking 2-line. I can't deal with that. How will I do this? And it has taken me a long time to find the heart. But again, I'm surrounded by people who love me and respect me and my work, and they're encouraging to me. They get me. I've been able, I bow to human design because the people it has allowed me to make connections with are what showed me that I had shitty connections at times in my life. And I was with people out of place, not because I wanted to be. And I perhaps took in and tolerated a lot that I didn't know I didn't have to. And so when I started making friendships and people didn't treat me that way, it was like, oh, I didn't even know friendship could be this way. I didn't even know what I didn't know. And it's embarrassing, I think. I felt a little bit of embarrassment and vulnerability there. But now I can see that there are people who would mention my name in a crowd, or who would stick up for me, or who do understand what I'm questions I'm asking, and where they're taking me. I feel protected in a way by the people who get me, I guess. And over the years, human design, you just got to put your time in, and the people will start to respect you because they assume you've gone through something if you've been in this long. I've been pinned against people sometimes with wars, and like, I have no ill will in my heart. I'm like, everyone is doing their work. Everybody is on their own path to awareness. I have to assume they're building awareness, and, their opinions may change, and they might have revelations in their own life. And I can understand why sometimes I'm painted as the villain. Like, if you have, tribal channels, you're very much like, I want to take care of the tribe. Like, I want all my people to be good. And sometimes I'll have to speak up and say things that need to be said, and you will be pointed out as the one who, but if that's what the community is needing, then someone has to speak up. And it does take a lot of heart to sometimes speak up. And I don't always speak up, but there are times where I try my best. And I've learned that sometimes I am willing to be villainized. I'm willing to be misunderstood. If I think it is what my community or my people need me to vocalize around, even if it's hard, even if it's pokey, I do it for, I think, not just myself. It's not so selfish. It's I want everyone around me to be good, And if they're not, I am not. If you're not good and you're my person, I am not good either. We are in a community. We're in a tribe like that. And I fell in love with an Indigenous man, and I gave birth to an Indigenous child. And so I've been learning a lot about community through their lens. And it's made me realize I didn't have a good understanding of what community really is. And I'm only just learning that now.
Oh, I hear you so much on that one. I don't know if it's a 6-line thing or if it's a tribal thing, but being surrounded with the wrong people and like you said, just like finding those people through human design is something that I've also experienced. Like, when I went up on the roof, look, I didn't know that was what was happening until maybe a year later.
Totally.
Yeah, because human design came to me when I was 34. And so I was like cutting all these people out, cutting all these interests out, just cut, 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 cut. I'm done, 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 done. And then I was very much, alone. I had my husband, who I absolutely love and adore. But it was us, and that's it. And then there was this sense of like, oh, but I still need my people. I'm at
Totally.
1949. It's like
Totally.
I need those people, and I also want to support people. I'm not, we can talk about being the lone wolves as manifestors, but the moment you put in that tribalness, it's like, no, we're not.
Where's my pack? Where's my pack?
Exactly. I need that pack. I need those people. And it is like surprisingly insane how, these people have just been drawn to me. We talk about the repelling aura, but it's just as magnetic. And so, yeah, okay, we could talk about being designed for, rejection, being designed
I
to.
hate that narrative. I hate that narrative.
Let's
Like
switch it.
I get that they're trying to prepare us, but I just don't find it encouraging. It gives me the same feeling of how I felt when I found out I was an ego manifester. It's like, oh great, there's something wrong with me. I got that title. I didn't realize it just meant heart led. And
Yeah.
what does it mean to know something by heart? And what does it mean to give heart to something? I do think that would have changed the way I felt. I don't think we have to change the language, but also I don't think we have to be strict with the language, but it is a language.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about like color and tone studies, because suddenly you can speak to people with this different language and this different awareness, and I just find it leads you to different places. I live on a tribe that is bordering Canada and the US, where the Syuk people are from, and they speak this language called Silkshin, and it's endangered. There's only a few people who speak the language, and they're over 70. And it's like, oh my gosh, this language will become extinct. So they're trying to teach it to the community to keep the language alive. And so it made me think a lot about language studies and the way that we are able to connect with each other in different ways based on the language we use. If you ever, I have a French background, and when you hear people speaking French together, they can go into certain things. We don't always have a word for that in English, let's say, or some things don't translate. And when you can speak these languages with people, there is something healing about it. And so there is something to be said for knowing the language and speaking it and not butchering it, but then also recognizing there are trigger words where it doesn't feel so good. There was even a time a couple years ago where people were getting on their high horse, like, you need to use these specific keywords and keynotes to activate these codes that will heal. And then it was like, okay, so what about if this is translated in German? Or
Yeah.
translated in French, and the energy of that tone is different, and they don't have a word that translates to that. And then that narrative kind of softened, oh, maybe we don't have to be so strict with this. But we learn information, and we're like, buy the book. This is part of humanity, where we can't escape this. This is how a lot of our minds work. And so you just need to let those kinks work themselves out. But it can sometimes be hard to hold space for that strictness and that, you know, intensity, when you'd rather be a little bit more spacious and expansive and fluid. But we all learn in different ways. And like when you study variable, you see these brains work differently, these bodies work differently. How can you even judge someone? Like there are people who have hated me and said venomous things to me, and then I look at their depths and I'm like, how could I hate them back? Like I see what's going on there. I see what my energy contributed to that, and I just need to learn from this and move on and not dwell on it too much.
Yeah, I think that, you do have that gate 22, the grace, which is on
You
my
have it too.
channels.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's so there is that grace for people, and being open to the fact that, okay, so it comes from somewhere. It comes from something. And it's not personal, even though, of course, at least in my experience, it feels fucking personal sometimes. But then it's like
But it's
taking that
not.
step back, and it's
Yeah.
not.
It's not.
And then I think, what you talked about with the language, I'm in Norway,
Yeah.
and my mentor
Cool.
is Swedish. And so it's like, are we not going to translate this? I mean, she just did this whole translation of the lines, and, in Norwegian, and they're doing it in Sweden and doing it in
Cool.
Swedish. I mean, of course, people want this in their own language.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
are we going to be strict about, well, Norwegian, we have like, I'm probably butchering the details here, but it's like we have like 30,000 words, and the American language has 100,000 words. And so
Okay.
we're not always going to find a word that works, which is why my vocabulary sometimes is just like, I don't get it, right? We're
with,
just not.
with some indigenous languages, there's 100 words for love.
Right.
Like there, and it just depends on the context and the way you're using it. Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't like to be super strict about anything. I like to cultivate an inner discipline, of course, but as soon as I'm like, that's not the rule, I try to check myself.
Yeah. And I think, as defined ajnas, both of us have defined ajnas. Now you have defined head, which mine is completely open and pressure to think right now. But but there has to be a softening. I think we can get really like, and especially with that 11 and 17, where it's like opinions and ideals, be like, this is it. This is the way it is. But no, there's a softening in that this is it for me. And then it can be it for you.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And having that grace. And of course, the sixth line being that, I can see both sides of the story. I can understand where people are coming from and having that
I don't think
point of
it's
view.
I don't think it's just the sixth line. As you stay in a study and as you devote yourself to your own experiment, which really just is just saying devote yourself to your own life and finding like what works for you. The longer people are in it, they do just soften. It just, around years of study, when people are around year 3 and year 4, there's a lot of combative nature. They're figuring things out. Bonds are breaking. We know that story. And then they get into year 4 and they often will pull away. They get into year 5 and they're starting to really find who their people are and whose philosophies seem to resonate. And we do just let each other go. We let each other find each other. We realize we resonate to different things. And then around year 6, the respect increases. And suddenly we realize we have different philosophies and views. And that's what we were all working toward from the beginning. And it's good. I've been in situations where people have, like, let's say, disagreed with my philosophy, or I've disagreed with theirs, or whatever. And then as time continues, there's this respect that is shared that, well, we can still be respectful in this awareness study and have differing opinions. And I can still want the best for you, even though we might swirl around in different crowds. You still provide something very useful and needed. It's just in a slightly different adjacent world to me, and that's fine. Like, so as people just stay in it and stick with it and do their own deconditioning, I feel they naturally soften. I do not feel that they harden. I do not feel that that is what comes of this. I think it's a deep softening, a deep respect for your fellow humanity. And for me, that's why I view it as a healing space. This is a space where people come to heal, to understand themselves, to confront some of the traumas that they've experienced, whatever their wounds are. And as you mix with people in this study, it is just another community. It's the same if you go into the astrology world. It's the same if you go into the numerology world or feng shui world or whatever world you want to dip your toes in. You'll find that because people are wounded and they're coming to understand and figure themselves out. So when someone flies off the handle and gets mad at you or whatever, it's an opportunity to go, well, we're all coming here for the same thing, to increase our awareness, to heal from the things that we've been through and understand ourselves. Is it really helpful if I go to war with someone? I often wonder, like, how the manifestor experience would shift if we emphasized you're here for peace. But what we emphasize is you're here to contend with your anger. Well, that seems a little, I don't know. Anger could be an afterthought. You're here for peace. And people define you by your anger and your rage. The projector's here for success. The generator's here for satisfaction. The reflector here to be surprised and dazzled by life. But we don't emphasize that. That's the afterthought. So it's this parroting of Ra's work where he did so much around figuring out deconditioning. Because that's where we were at. So what happens if we have gone through that cycle of deconditioning? And we know that life it's a long-term sentence of conditioning and deconditioning and conditioning and deconditioning and just expanding your awareness to reach a new level of intelligence. Once we reach that new level of intelligence, we continue to develop it. And I don't think in that continuation of development, we're here to be at war with each other or to become harder. I think, at least in my experience, the study has softened me, has softened me as a parent, has softened me as a friend, as a child, as a partner. I don't think I am here for anger. I do feel here for peace. And I try to extend that to other manifestors as well.
What does peace feel like to you?
Well, it's a frequency you drop into, I can hear it on people. I had mentioned earlier, you can hear Ra. If you listen to his later work, you can hear the young, passionate in his voice and the cadence and tone he speaks in. And then as it matures, it does drop into where he's sitting at the seat of the soul. He's sitting in the passenger consciousness. He is between those worlds in that way. And it is kind of bland sounding. I don't mean any disrespect, but it is an even tone. It's not as animated. It's not as, you know. And so I guess for me, peace feels like unruffled feathers. It feels like a stillness inside. The lake is quiet. There aren't these big waves. It's very easy to breathe. It's like deep inhales, deep exhales. And for me, there's love around. There's love around when I'm in that peace frequency. You can feel it around you through the others. At least that's how it feels for me. But I would like to hear, if you're familiar with that in yourself, how you would describe it.
Yeah, I was just talking to Dave. We recorded the podcast episode yesterday, and so I mentioned that there, but I will...
Neutrino Radio, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah, he's quite brilliant.
Yes, he is.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, for me, I really find there's a difference between the mundane, everyday feeling of peace, just being at ease. He used the word comfort, emotional manifestors,
Yeah.
And then there's a different kind of peace that comes when I've initiated something. Of course, we're always initiating, but just like I've done something big, I've created something huge. Like I mentioned to him, was like when I was done creating my conference and I was up in my room, I had, we had just packed everything down. I had done the walkthrough, seen the empty room, come upstairs, had my emotional release. And then there was just like this emptiness. And I hate to use the word emptiness.
I know what you mean.
Right? Because it was just like nothing, still, absolutely
still waters.
Yes. And also just like what just happened wasn't me. It was through me. And there's no pride. There's no feeling of success. There's no feeling of satisfaction. It's just quiet.
Ah, the exhale.
Yes, the exhale. And that was just like when there's been a couple of big initiations in my, when am I in the 5th year or whatever I'm in? I always forget the math.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. Yeah. But there's been a couple of big of those initiations. And then that feeling afterwards has always been so mind-boggling, because my mind as an emotional manifestor as well, it's just like, oh, that high, that's the thing, that woohoo, yay, passion, drive, let's go. But no, it was just like this. Oh. But then in the day-to-day life, it's just that comfort of being allowed to be myself, having this husband who absolutely loves me and adores me and wants the best for me. And, us working together to create something better for ourselves and just feeling at ease.
I have started to feel understood. I have started to feel understood. And I realize how misunderstood I felt for a long time. But I'm very fortunate in that I have met people who have given me a lot of grace, or they've extended me a lot of grace. And it's made me feel like they understand me and are on my team. And there is something quite healing about feeling understood or something, and understanding others. I work with a lot of manifestors, and right now, privately, I have 3 emotional manifestors that I'm working with, and just understanding their waves and what their waves look like. I realized I had misinterpreted the high and the low. So like I would work with a manifestor and they're saying they're in the high. I was like, this to me would seem like the low, So I needed to get more adept and talk about it. And even with some of the manifestors, they were like, maybe I need to look at what my high and low is. And just, and because there are different kinds of waves, I don't experience that as the ego manifestor. I'm a space holder for it. So I find the emotional manifestor to be so powerful, the most powerful of the manifestors. And the splenic are the most cool.
Yeah.
They're so cool. They're so cool. But the emotional manifestors is powerful in this really curious way. And their power comes through the emotional field and their ability to ride those waves. And when there is an aware emotional manifestor, the wisdom that comes through the emotions is pretty profound. Like, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I was an adept at recognizing where they were at, if it was high or if it was low. Like, how does this wave work? And I've learned a lot of emotional manifestors don't know that either. They have to tune in for some time to even track the wave, because when you're in your emotions, it's quite hard to be logical, or, you're in it and you're swept away. And how do you bring your awareness with you? Like, it's an awareness center, but I don't have it. I have the ajna. You have these two awareness centers, but your governing one is that solar plexus. And that just creates, like, that's where we're mutating. That's where we're so evolved. That's what's new about us. And I don't claim to be a master of emotions whatsoever. I'm here completely to learn that. But I have to have these boundaries of who I work with, because when I connect with someone, I fall in love with you. I adore you. I love to see you this way. And I will get swept away on the emotional journey with you. And I'm not willing to change that in my work. I'm going to get swept away with you. So I can't handle a lot of people at once, because I get, you could say, emotionally invested in the emotional people that I'm with, or not emotional, but that's just my pattern. And it's fun for me to get lost in their world and go on the journey with them, where I can be like, so what are we feeling? Like, I'll drop into that we. Who are we talking about? What's going on with us? And as the undefined solar plexus, it's very educational for me to get swept away and allow myself to get emotional with them and cry with them and be on that journey with them. But then I do need to disconnect. And so otherwise I'll be thinking about you all day, all night. I'll dream. It's hard to shake it off. So I've had to develop these rituals and ways of caring for myself that I can see now I'm being perceived as like strict and having strong boundaries. But it's because I have had to, because working with people, and it's really the emotional manifestor who taught me this, but working with people can be challenging on you. And you can want to do it. And, they can have really hard, horrible things going on with them. And they'll confess these awful things and that they're experiencing. And sometimes you just need to hold them in that. And I'm with you. I'm here. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to do anything. You just hold present so they're not alone, so that it can come out. And when the emotional manifestor is allowed to do that, man, do they leap through awareness fast. Holy cow. And boom, 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 boom. Like, they process quite quickly if they are held in their emotions. Now, if they're not, can really delay or prolong the awareness building or something. And I'm sure you'll be able to speak to that experience more than me. I'm really just the one witnessing it and holding space. I don't claim to experience it the way the emotional manifestor does. But that design type seems to have awareness leaps in this very curious way when they're aware. When they're not, it can really drag out for years, but gosh, can they learn quickly? And so there's something so mutative about the solar plexus.
What comes to mind is, and I don't know if this is true, but it was just a story I saw about the buffalo, the difference between the buffalo and the cows. And so when there's a rainstorm coming, the cow will see the rainstorm and then they'll run the opposite direction, trying to run away from the rainstorm. But then the rainstorm will catch up to the cow, and then the cow will be running in the rainstorm, prolonging the experience. Where the buffalo will see the rainstorm and will charge to the rainstorm and go into the rainstorm. And so it will be running through the rainstorm, allowing the rainstorm to pass quicker. And I feel like that was such a great analogy for any emotional being, but especially the emotional manifestors who are, listening to this, hopefully. It's like we have to charge into the emotions, to sit with them, to not bypass it in any way. And it's so easy to numb it out. We've been taught that from childhood. I mean, a lot of us are born and raised and have parents who are non-emotionals, who do not understand it. You know, one of the most healing sentences I've ever heard from my mother was, I always try to fix your emotions, didn't I? And it was just like, oh,
Yeah.
thank
Oof.
you. I needed that. I needed that to be allowed to go into my process, to understand that the shame I have around all of my big emotions, it's conditioning. It's not real. Now I'm not going to go out and I'm going to spew my emotions on people and be like, blah, you know, of course, as an emoting manifester with the 1222, I do speak into my space of trusted peers and friends, but I'm not going to drag people along into all of the depths of despair that I can go to. But if I don't allow myself to go to that depth of despair, I'm not going to understand the clarity that can come on the other side. And the same goes for the passion, though. You know, you talked about James Alexander earlier, and I've done 3 of his semesters in his analysis course.
Oh, love that.
Beautiful man. Absolutely love him.
Yeah, I'm very drawn to him too. I just like I can't quite describe it. I like the way he emits. I like the way he organizes his thoughts. I find him to be very compassionate. Like you can tell when someone is read and studied, and then they reach a point where they do go through this mutation with it, and they do it their way. And I like that he's coming out like that right now, or perhaps is a bit louder than I've seen in the past, and I respect that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I hope he can get even louder because a lot of people need to learn from him. But
Yeah.
you know, 5-1 profile, they're always going to be a little bit in the background. But he talked about, and I really just was like mind-blowingly dawned on me how the 1222 can like lock in to a certain frequency of feeling, like not allowing yourself to go to the depths, not allowing yourself to go to the highs, or only being in the highs, or only being in the depths, you know?
Totally.
And that really resonated with me, where I was just like, I've locked myself into not allowing myself to go down depths of despair. God has left me. I am forsaken. And it's not true, but it's a feeling that needs to go through me somehow because there is wisdom, clarity, awareness on the other side of that. And
Yeah.
when we don't, we get stuck.
In my shamanic background, a big part of my work is communicating with creatures, botanicals, the landscapes, and divining through them, having messages through them. And you talked about land creatures before, cows, and I don't, and in where I'm from, we don't have buffalo, we have bison and horses, and and because I grew up on the prairies, a lot of our life was observing creatures, but they were in confined spaces. Like it was in, like, let's say a field, but there is a fence somewhere on that field. So not, these aren't like wild creatures in that way. And when we would observe these land creatures, let's say specifically the cow, when the rain would come, we didn't know there was rain coming, but we would look to the cows because the cows would all lay. The horses, they would all crouch, they would all lay on the ground as a sign that rain was coming. So I was listening acutely when you were like, we can charge the rain or we can run from the rain. And I was like, when I observed the cows in the prairies, they would let us know when there was a rumbling in the skies, when an emotion was coming, when rain was upon us before we realized. And so you start to be able to read the weather and the landscapes through the creature's behavior. And I was just thinking of that when I was listening to you, because I was like, well, what does it mean when you sit down and let the rainstorm come? And I don't claim to know what that is, but I feel like based on the story that you gave me as the undefined solar plexus, what would it mean to sit in the field with a storm coming and let it come? I don't know what that feels like. I'm always trying to avoid it, or, quickest way to resolve it. And my work for sure is sitting in the weight of the emotion and letting it rain down upon you. But there is something, so it makes you come undone. It's so unraveling when you do that. And I love when the emotional manifestor lets us in on that experience, because it's like when they get emotional or they let it erupt and come out, or they're sharing it on their close friends list or whatever, as the undefined solar plexus, it's almost like it's coming out of me too. it's almost like I can connect to them and feel the weight of the emotions, and it would maybe be hard to release on my own. But through them, I can connect to the pieces that I need to. And it's like they're facilitating a release within me just by them allowing their release to have a witness. And I also appreciate that it can be so hard to, or challenging to be in that state and have a witness, obviously, because you just want to be held. Or I know as a hermit, I just want to hide when I'm going through that. But that's why I think they're so powerful, is that the way they can facilitate healing in the other without them realizing at all. It's just by you connecting to your emotion and letting it take over, even if it's messy, even if it's aggressive, connects and activates something in us that is ready to come out. So as the emotional manifestor, I just want to bow to you and what you allow us to witness in you, because you likely aren't even fully aware of what it facilitates in us when you just let yourself go there. And that's every emotional creature, but there is something with the emotional manifestor and that energy being activating within us, witnessing you. So you are the most powerful manifestor, in my opinion, but that's where I stand on that.
I appreciate that reflection. I'm married to a completely open solar plexus.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Powerful.
It's he is immensely grateful that human design has come into our
I would
life.
love to hear what he shows you. So I view a totally open center as a sort of mirror, a mirror to the environment. We can learn a lot about his emotions by looking back at what his grooming environment was as a child, but also now you are the teacher, the primary teacher in his life. I would love to hear what you see when you look in that mirror.
Yeah, he that's a great way of framing it. He knows way before me where I'm at. And so earlier in our relationship, if he would be like, are you okay? What's going on? How you doing? Do you need a foot rub? And I wouldn't be aware. And I'm also, unconsciously defined in my solar plexus, right? It's not conscious for me. And I would get so mad at him because he'd be like, I'm fine,
Of
go
course. Of
away.
course.
What are you doing? But he felt it, he knew. And so he mirroring that back to me.
We feel the air prickle. As an undefined solar plexus, we can feel the air prickle when you are feeling away. And it's true. It's as if you guys don't always know it in the moment, because that's not how your wave works. But as somebody who doesn't experience that, when we plug in, we do check in, because it's like, you're slamming the cupboards a little hard, or you're, like the air is prickling around you. But even that, like, then you're what? Then you're forced to respond, right? Like, what's wrong? Nothing.
Yes.
Pissed off. Yeah, totally. So how do they support us, when we're prickling the air?
And that is where he's really learned that when he can feel and sense that shit's going on, he'll just come and he'll give me a hug and he'll say, I'm here for you.
Ugh.
Let me know if you need anything.
Got me right in the feelings.
Right?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
He's really learning that I'm not here to respond. I'm not here to go into that whole explaining shit, but he'll let me know I'm here. And then if it's too much for him, come on. I mean, I'm two freaking waves going on at the same time here, and it can get intense for him. And I understand that. And so he's also learned to excuse himself. And again, like you said with that second line, sometimes I just want to be alone. I don't really want you to be around me. And I'll let you know if I want you to be around me. I'll let you know if I need that hug. I'll let you know if I want to, just cuddle up in your arms and just lay on the couch. And so he'll excuse himself and go play drums. Get the energy out.
Get it out. An instrument. Yes. That's also kind of hot. So you got a drummer in your house? Oh, yeah. Fun. I love a musician. I love a musician. Oh my God, the energy they put with their instrument. I think of the body like an instrument, So I was a singer, so I was told my body was my instrument. So I love when you hear somebody with an instrument. Like, I got a feeling cognition son, and he's a 2/4. And we started to discover this musical brilliance with him. Now, he's surrounded in a musical environment. My husband and I do work with sound. And all of a sudden, he just started hearing video game songs, and he would go figure it out on the piano. And I was like, what's happening here? This is something special. And so we started to invest in that and encourage that. He has a piano in his room. And I noticed when he would get worked up or something would have upset him, he'd go to his piano. Before bed, part of his little wind down, he goes and plays a little song on his piano, and he will change. He has a keyboard. So he will change the sound coming out. Sometimes it's a vocal sound, sometimes it's a Spanish sound, and it will reflect his mood. And he learns, if he can hear it, he can figure it out on the piano. It's just really incredible. And it's neat to see what he plays based on what he's feeling. And so I just think there's something so special with music and instruments, and those being these conduits for release. And like you see, like people with fifth tones, and they experience frisson, they get these feelings from sound and from music. And I do think that we can all experience that in our own ways. But like I work in sound healing, that's my shamanic background. And so, when you understand there's this intimate feedback system that you're equipped with, suddenly what you hear in your day-to-day, the way your parents talk to you, the way your friends talk to you, the way your followers talk to you, like that's all sound that you're taking in, and it can affect your intimate feedback system. And I suspect anyone with fifth tones or fifth colors are even more sensitive to that than the average person. And just even hearing you talk about like your husband can sense something's going on with you, that is this mystical brilliance that we're each equipped with that we're not fully aware of yet. So as we increase our awareness of these subtle senses that are imperceptible to some of our other senses, like there really are people who are psychic. There really are people who like can read the room, know everything going on in the room. That's just an exciting time to be alive, and that's where you're brilliant. That's where you're brilliant. Oh, wow. Like, it's just so cool, I think. So I know you had commented, like, you can hear my excitement because I find people so interesting.
Mhm.
Like you can do what? Oh, like, it's just so cool to me.
Mhm. Yeah, he's touch cognition. And
Love that.
I'm still trying to see how that works with him beyond his nervous touch. But without going too deep into it, there's a part of me that wonders, there's like, I think it's like 3 or 5 minutes after his birth time,
Changes?
it goes from nervous touch to high sound. And there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if you're a high sound with touch cognition. But I
The
don't know.
way that the way that I experiment with that, because I see that a lot. I've written articles about that. Like that's it's hard to talk about this area because 70% of the body graphs that I have on file use a rounded birth time. And so you do want to like proceed with caution because then people start to create rules around what they think it means to be high sound or etc. And it can just become a barrier, I guess. So the way that I approach that with people is I will look at what variables are really steady and secure. So in this case, let's say that there's something that can shift in the determination variable, but we know the environment variable is set. We know that that's what it is. I then place all the experimentation emphasis on the environment variable and aligning that and getting more adept at recognizing that, because then what we find, what I've noticed happens is their determination variable naturally starts to align and reveal itself, because you're talking about him being a passive brain then flipping to being an active brain with a totally different color on top. It would totally change his experience. So if he was like an active participant in the experimentation process, he might not be. Like, you might be the one who's like all about it and he might be there witnessing you, but let's just say he's into it. You would experiment with both. You would embrace both, but you would place the emphasis in the environment and trust the body's environmental awareness to reveal, like, it will naturally start to eat healthy. It'll naturally start to consume things in a way that's more aligned for it. But his sensitivities would be similar. Like, for example, if you're nervous touch, my son is nervous touch and I'm high sound, and we dine quite well together,
Mhm.
like, because it's similar in this way. Um, we can get really chatty over dinner, or we'll be doing something. We might be moving around. Like, we might be chatting and gobbling or like playing a game and snacking. Like, we love that. So in his case, they might be really similar, but I find it would be great to know, like, oh, there's something about that would be fun. So experimenting and embracing both, and then putting full trust in the body and experimenting with the environment variable specifically through that alignment there it would reveal itself. And you would, and he would be likely the one to go, this was what feels true for me. This is how I want to play with it, kind of thing. But as the witness, like he's one of your muses, he's one of your subjects. You're the sixth line, you're watching him and learning through him. He's your little guy, like, oh. And you would want to know how to support him, right? And in my experience, the best way to support him would be to just emphasize his authority and his environment. The environment, everything comes back to the environment. Every variable, everything's going to come back to the environment because you're vulnerable to what's around you.
I love that.
Or not around you, or what's missing. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm definitely going to contemplate that. He's narrow valleys, and he's a 1-3, and so it's really interesting just to see how that plays out. Like you said, he's my muse. I'm always watching. I'm always there. And he's not, he gets what and this is why I'm like, I feel like there has to be a right variable there, because if he's not a right brain, he would be a quad left.
And that does feel true to you?
There's something there that's just like, he picks up what I put down so easily, and he'll remember things, and he'll be like, oh, that's a projector thing, or that's like a generator thing. But he's never heard a lecture or gone into anything, but he loves to hear me talk about it, and he's all excited about it, absolutely, especially the whole undefined solar plexus thing. That's just been like life-changing for him. And he's sacral authority, and so it's just like, I don't know. But I'm definitely going to look out for that.
Let's entertain the idea he is quad left. Let's just entertain that. I know a lot of quad left husbands who are obsessed with their wives, and they will pick things up. You know what I mean? We're talking about a passive brain or an active brain, and that's just really the way they're consuming reality around them. They might be consuming it almost passively, peripherally in that way, or more of a hungry brain. It can be challenging to determine that, or it's a determination variable. It can be challenging to determine that, but let's say he is quad left. It doesn't mean that he wouldn't be tuned into you. In fact, he might be very tuned into you. You know what I mean? Like yours might be the whole focus. This is just the way that he is consuming and ingesting reality. He might have things going on around him. He might take it in directly. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just about the way he's nourished. And I think he could be quad right, quad left. It wouldn't matter. I think he'd probably always pick things up off you because you got to appreciate the 6-2 emotional manifestor is a conditioning force, and he's got an open solar plexus. He's made to pick up and feel things off you. I don't think it matters the direction his variable faces or how much activity or passivity in his chart. If he loves you, he's tuned into you. He's valleys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's a 5.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because he's very tuned into me.
Do you happen to know the tone beneath his environment variable?
Uncertainty, I believe.
That's on the personality side. So he's either going to be smell, taste, or outer vision.
Taste. Let me just double check. I can do
sure.
That real quick. Because I have it. Let's see.
Thank you for looking for me. I'm curious. My curiosity gets the best of me. Me too. And I appreciate this is very deep in the chart, but like we're in good company and we just want to understand 6-2s. We want to understand our love. Are you kidding me?
Exactly. Like, give it to me. Let me see all of it.
I adore.
Oh, yeah.
And he's one of your biggest teachers too, right? Like I've been placing the emphasis on you, but you're really the student. You're really the learner. And he's really teaching you.
Yep. Taste. It's a second that.
Time. So he's picking up. Oh, God. So taste in the environment variable is picking up and sampling little bites everywhere he goes. So literally just with that unique configuration, we don't even need to know what his determination variable is. Of course, we want to know, and of course, but also he's made to tune in and pick up little bites of information. Yum, 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 yum. He would also maybe even do really well, like conversing over like business meetings or like chit-chatting and having, little dinner with you. And yeah, but that could benefit really great for nervous touch or high sound. So I think what I think what we're learning here in this moment of deeply analyzing him and understanding him is we can support him no matter what he is. He's someone who's tuned into the information field. If he loves you, he's going to be picking it up. If he doesn't love you, I guess he could be picking it up too, but he might start to have, start to feel some kind of way. But the fact that he's like, tell me more, yeah, I think he's got everything he needs around him.
I love that so much, Vanessa.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this conversation is coming to a very nice, rounded completion. Is there anything you would like to add to the conversation? Something we haven't touched on?
Think so. I mean, you gave me some notice and braced me for like, not everybody agrees with your variable perspective. And I think I'd probably be doing something that needed to be evaluated if everybody did agree with it. But I admit that made me feel a little bit nervous and afraid, like, oh, there I am doing something wrong again. But I think what you remind me is that's okay to feel that way. And also not everybody is going to get it. Historically, when we've shown new things, not everybody gets it. And I can completely appreciate, coming from a medical background, that not everyone would be attracted to the shamanic arts. Not everyone is attracted to the medical background. We are all attracted to different things, and that's what's okay. We have to encourage each other to do that. But I don't need to self-limit or become quiet because not everybody agrees with me. And I admit it's taken me, look, I'm a late bloomer. It's taken me, that's a hard lesson for me. It's hard for me to upset people. I don't ever want to upset people. And I've learned I can do something with good intentions and it can still hurt people. And it's like, oh my God, like I would never want to do that to you. That couldn't be further from what I wanted. And also I'm seeing that you are hurt by my actions. I'm sorry. I would never want to do that. And it can be hard to always contend with that. But I do want to say that is softening in my life. It used to be dominated by that. And so if there's any manifestor listening, we're not doomed to that. I do not always feel tired or exhausted. I do not feel like the world hates me. I feel incredibly supported. I feel respected by my community, and I deeply respect my community in return. I feel this overwhelming energy to bow to my community, and I just trust that the people I'm supposed to surround myself with are there. And I don't have to self-limit anymore. I'm in the place now where I can be louder about what I see, and I can let it resonate with some and not with others. And I don't have to get too caught up on that. I have in the past. And I've really stayed quiet and self-limited out of fear that I would upset people. And I would hold in things because I didn't want to upset people. Or it's like, actually, I don't see it that way. Well, who am I to say that? Mm-hmm. And as I started swallowing down some of these things, I do think that is what makes us sick. I am ultimately here following the questions of why do we get sick? Why are we not understanding, And I can appreciate that that's an upsetting place to be because we don't want to be sick. But if we know the body is designed to heal, I have to be brave in talking about things and not swallowing them down because in my world, they might make me sick. If I continue to be in harmful, unsupportive relationships, in my world, I'm entertaining the idea that that might make me sick. So I have to cultivate an inner discipline that puts distance between people I don't resonate with, philosophies I don't resonate with, and I must respect that other people out there are doing the same, and I might be the thing they're putting distance between. So all the respect to them, stay on your journey. I don't have to be for everyone, and also I can still stay on my path and give my message to those who are willing to listen. And my message happens to be, let's listen to our bodies. They're more intelligent than we realize. They're communicating with us constantly. How might we understand the unique instrument we've been given to experience reality with? I don't have to make everyone happy. I have to make myself happy. And I'm happy. I'm happy and I'm loved well and I'm well rested. And I'm very lucky to find myself where I am now based on where I've been.
Gorgeous. I think that's a really important message for any manifestor, and especially those who are coming, who feel misunderstood by the world and finding human design for the first time and just like, oh my God, can this help me? And yes, It can in certain ways. Through the
I
awareness.
love how you say manifestor. You say manifestor.
Oh,
I love that. I love how it sounds on you, manifestor. And so is this influence from Norway?
in
Because I
Norwegian,
don't
the
you don't
manifestor?
have an accent.
No, born and raised in South Dakota for the first 7 years of my life.
You say manifestor. I'm like, ooh,
Manifestor.
she gives me little tingles the way she says certain words. I'm sound sensitive. I just like that. When people will say splenic or splenic. I'm like, ooh, what are we doing there? Like that we have ways we say things, and I'm always like, Uranus, like all these ways. Anyway, my own little thing there, but I just got a little tingle when you said manifestor. I was like, ooh, what is that? I like that.
I'm feeling embarrassed over here now. It's like, what did I do?
No, you're perfect. You're perfect. Just don't feel any way if all of a sudden you hear me out in the world saying manifestor. Hello, manifestor. And you were like, that came from you. She liked it. She just liked the pronunciation.
Perfect. Okay, so can you tell people where they can find you, what they can, how can they get into your realm? How can they, be guided by your
Well,
stuff?
if you're attracted to my angle that I take with how I use variable, I offer trainings that you can purchase at any time. I have a basics training that just kind of gives you an overview of how this part of the body graph works. And then I have an in-depth variable training where I go into each of the four variable and really richly translate the colors and tones there through this way of let's understand the intimate feedback system your body's equipped with. Place big emphasis on the body, but we break down the personality consciousness as well. And because of my background in the shamanic arts, I like to use the language of like your body and spirit. And the spirited part of you is your personality consciousness. But that study is really showing you what is brilliant within you, in your spirit and within your body. And I break that down. And I find that in classic human design, there is a lot of emphasis on the literal food that you put in your mouth. But through my work, it was as if that was a barrier and people weren't really ready to experiment with that. And so I take a very big philosophical and metaphorical approach to that. So when we're talking about ingesting something and feeding yourself, well, we explore dynamic nourishment or dynamic surroundings. You're eating so much more than food. You're ingesting the shows you watch. You're ingesting the people around you. And so how can we understand your color palette, your tonal palette based on those things? And then I go to food. And I just find that opens people up to seeing these themes in their life because we get very distracted about diet. We're diet culture obsessed, So I like to de-emphasize that and point it out in the other parts of the life to connect with people. And I do that with each of the variable before I go down to like what we would consider some of the classic information. So I just view my work as an expansion of variable studies and taking it in a very deep, meaningful place. And I do that, have those trainings for people who are like needing to get the baseline understanding of how this works. How does bass, tone, color, line, gait, how does that work? So that's what those are. And in my wellness club, this is a resource I wanted to create for someone on the healing journey or somebody who's in the healing arts, let's say, or they work with people. And so I tucked in my sound library, which is every one of the colors and tones we could possibly have. I have all those audios available because I have a lot of people who do readings and they need to go refresh on that. And so they use that to understand themselves, but also the people in their life. And then if you're experimenting with this deep, enriching study, you need to kind of embody it and bring it into the practical. So I have little experiments that I'll prompt people with to do just in a fun, playful way. It's like this cute, fun way to get in touch with your body. So I sometimes will have these experiments that I'm giving you. I give you some other resources just to get to know the metaphysical ailments your body might have. And then my big feature in the Wellness Club is the frequency bar. And that's the place where I have a lot of shamanic soundtracks that you can plug into to go and do the deep inner deconditioning work. And that is based on, in shamanic studies, you can go journey to an upper world or a lower world or middle world and just get to know these different fields, I guess you could say. And the way that I've designed this shamanic journeying, I call it inner expeditions. You take an inner expedition to journey to the inner world and discover the landscapes and creatures and omens and signs that are within you. And I then help you with another library. I love to build a library, love to build a resource. I help you translate whatever it is you discovered. So if on your journey you discovered this lake inside and these herons around, and then your grandma came up, we will tell you what that all means when you come out of your journey and translate it. So that's a very emotional part of my work, very cathartic. And you'll notice anybody who works with something like human design, they will also provide the somatic resource, like the tool, whether it's talk therapy, whatever, they'll provide the tool to help you take your theory that you're learning and put it into your body to help you process it and bring it to practical in real life. So that's what my frequency healing component does. So my wellness club is really a hub of resources for the human design lover who works in the healing arts. And that's kind of the foundation of my work. There's these trainings and this resource, and I am in the phase of building out cute expansions of that. For example, have a blog on my website that is braiding feng shui and human design. So whatever your environment is, if your shores, if your caves, how would you set up your living room? How would you set up your bedroom? And the reason I created that was because that's my background. And also, let's say you're low on resources and you can't invest in something but you want to experiment, or you need to leave your job, but I don't know how, or you need to get a divorce, but I don't know how. Some of the easiest places to experiment is right in your home. Move the furniture around, see how it makes you feel. There's a flow of energy in that space. So I've tried to figure out, how can I create resources that I can build a life off of and make a living with? And how can I have free resources and build out things that, doesn't always have to cost money, but everything I do is like a fusion. It's not this original parroting of source material because I'm not there anymore. I used to do that, but I've been in the study for a decade. I can't keep it does change you, and you have to just let it change you and then be brave in sharing how you've been affected and transformed. So that's what I've kind of built my career around. I'm moving into a phase of embracing more of my shamanic side publicly, but I needed to get myself established with my perspective on variable and how I use it, just because that's where I'm at now. And to continue going forward in my direction with my work, I need that available to me, because I can't keep explaining it or teaching it. I just need to now point. This is how I understand it and how I use it. And if you're attracted to that, it's available to you whenever you need. Come on the journey with me. This is where I'm at. I'm the student. I'm a good student. I love to learn. And I see that I can be positioned as a teacher, but I'm not a teacher yet. I'm on the roof. Maybe one day I will be, but right now I'm still the student learning, the journalist reporting, and the shamanic healer who is existing in this weird world. And it's a beautiful world to be in, and I really love it here. So I've designed my life around this, and I really wouldn't have it any other way.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I will put all of this in the show notes so it's easy to find, and just go invest in your time to learn more about your own variable. And yeah, Vanessa, this has been such an amazing, beautiful conversation. I am so
Thank you.
blessed and grateful that you wanted to come on.
Of course. Yes. I was like, immediately, fun. That was my reaction as soon as you asked me. And then I never got back to you, just booked an appointment. So embarrassing. But here we are, and it all worked out. And thank you for thinking of me in this creation you wanted to make. I appreciate that.